my name is Kate. Thanks for tuning in. During the next 5 minutes, I'm going to enlighten you about the 7 strategies of assessment that teachers can employ to increase student learning. First of all, what is the role of a teacher? If you said to teach students your specific content area in hopes they learn the material and achieve mastery, then I agree with you, and you will most likely enjoy this presentation. For those of you who did not say that, then buckle in. It's going to be a long 5 minutes. Again, the following strategies focus on how we as teachers can increase student learning by linking assessment and learning. So let's jump right in. Strategy 1 is the first component to help students know where they are going on their learning path. To do this, the teacher should provide them clear and understandable learning targets or goals. This will help students to understand why they are doing a certain activity and to understand what they are learning. It's important at this stage that we note the difference of formative and summative assessment. Formative assessment can be formal or informal processes teachers and students use together to gather evidence for the purpose of informing the next steps in learning. The key to formative assessment is how we as teachers use the information gathered to adjust teaching and our next steps. Summative assessment provides evidence of student achievement for the purpose of making a judgment about student competence or program effectiveness. The key to summative assessment is that it is mainly used to evaluate student learning rather than shape learning. Strategy 2 is the second component for helping students know where they are going on their learning path. The goal of Strategy 2 is to create a classroom culture that showcases learning. To do this, we must make learning targets clear and understandable. Sharing strong and weak examples with students will allow them to figure out what quality work looks like and a picture of the intended learning target. The outcome of successfully using this strategy can be greater student achievement and a learning goal approach that is well worth the effort. Strategy 3 helps students determine where they are currently on their learning path. To do this, teachers use effective feedback to improve student learning. Effective feedback identifies student strengths and weaknesses regarding a specific learning target. Effective feedback gives students information about their progress and how to proceed. Giving positive impact feedback should be the teacher's goal, which leads to a learning orientation. It's important to give useful feedback effectively that gets students to think. It's also just as important to know how to act on that feedback. Strategy 4 is the second component to helping students determine where they are currently on their learning path. Teachers students how to self-assess and set goals can be challenging, but the benefits greatly outweigh these challenges. There are several ways to include self-assessments in the classroom. It's important to have students create hard goals that are specific and challenging. Successful use of this strategy can result in students increasing their own effectiveness and becoming self-directed learners. Strategy 5 is the first of 3 components that help the teacher know how they can close the learning gap. We know getting student feedback is incredibly important, but if not acted upon by the teacher, then the feedback is not useful for the student. Building time into the teaching cycle to act on the feedback and results from our diagnostic assessment is crucial to being an effective teacher. There are many ways to use assessments, both formative and summative, to diagnose the learning need. Strategy 6 is the second of 3 components that help the teacher know how they can close the learning gap. Teachers should scaffold lessons to focus on specific topics or components of a lesson. After focused instruction, allow students time to practice and get feedback before a summative assessment. Use appropriate diagnostic assessments and give students opportunities to revise and make progress towards the learning target. Students will learn that if they put in the work and do the learning, the grade will follow. Strategy 7 is the last of 3 components that help teachers know how they can close the learning gap. This strategy encourages students to track their progress, reflect on it, and finally share what they have learned. This exercise can help students gain an understanding about themselves as a learner. The hope is that by reflecting on their progress, students will have a deeper appreciation for what they have learned. Sharing what they have learned to others will reinforce the material and increase their knowledge retention. Now, to recap, I described 7 strategies of assessment that teachers can employ to increase student learning. Strategy 1, provide a clear and understandable vision of a learning target. Strategy 2, use strong and weak examples to communicate clear learning targets. Strategy 3, give effective feedback to improve student learning. Strategy 4, Teach students how to self-assess and set goals. Strategy 5. Diagnose needs for focused instruction. Strategy 6. Allow time for focused practice and revision. And finally, Strategy 7. Have students track, reflect on, and share what they have learned. Hopefully, the takeaway you got from this Ignite talk is how we as teachers can utilize these 7 strategies in the classroom to increase student learning by linking assessment with learning. Thank you.